ba'd. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue with where we left off last week in the Seerah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and we had stopped just at the end, or after I performed the commentary on the story of al-ifk, where Sayyid Ummuna Aisha radiallahu anha was spoken of in a very negative and disrespectful and rude manner, and how the Quran came and talked about that, and the Quran addressed the situation and all of the different aspects of what happened during that period. And these verses are extremely important, and they're very powerful, and I advise people to often go back and read them. They're not difficult to understand with a simple translation of these verses. Second page and third page of Surah An-Nur, you'll understand what's being said. You don't really need a lot of sharh and tafsir or like a scholar to explain things to you. They're pretty self-explanatory. But at the same time, they're very deep, and they talk about an aspect of societal existence that is important for us as Muslims. The ethics and the values that we should carry within our communities, and how to see one another, how to treat one another. And this topic of gossip and rumors and people's integrity and conflict of interest, these are ethical issues that will generate a lot of questions, right? And these are the type of questions that our youth should be asking. In order for them to figure out how they're going to carry themselves within their lives, they have to be thinking about these topics, and they have to be asking questions about them as well. Instead of the boring questions of can I wear a necklace, can I eat chicken from Kentucky, can I these questions that are honestly a waste of breath. The questions should be much more ethically driven, in terms of what is correct, and how what is the right decision in this dilemma, because life is filled with ethical dilemmas where it's hard to know what the right answer is, and sometimes there's almost no right answer. It's all that's there is a good intention, because it's too complicated, right? And the Quran makes our lives easier by taking topics and and giving a very pure example of one type of mistake and why it's wrong and what to do, and how to correct it in the future. And that's the beauty and that's the power of the Quran is that that transformation, that transition from a bad behavior or a bad ethic to the correct one. And the topics that were revealed within this period after Al-Khandaq and before Al-Hudaybiyah. This is an important part of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. It's only a year and a half, but it's a very rich year and a half. A lot happened a lot of Quran was revealed within this year and a half. I mean, the Quran was coming down in abundance because a lot was happening, and the focus for that year and a half was internal. It's like there was a little bit of a hiatus in terms of wars, because it's hard to preach ethicality, it's hard to preach morality when people are scared for their lives, when they are being bombarded by battles and armies and wars. It's hard, so you have to just focus on the ethics of war and courage. But then when Khandaq ended, and the Prophet ﷺ said his famous word, الْيَوْمَ نَغْزُوهُمْ وَلَا يَغْزُونَنَا. From now on, we go to them, they don't come to us anymore. They'll never again will Medina be raided. And this is not a prophecy that he made, ﷺ. It's an understanding of reality. It's how he saw the current situation, that they won't be able to do it again. Khalas. They've run out of options. They'll never be able to actually come together and do this to us. So that gave them some time to focus internally. Okay, what are we like? What are we really like? Where are our flaws? No one's perfect. The Sahaba weren't perfect people. They weren't perfect. I say that, and I understand that some people get a little bit upset. No, they weren't perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. They were human beings, and they weren't perfect, and they made mistakes like everyone else. The difference between us and them is that they were quicker to identify their mistakes, and they were quicker to fix them. And that's what made them special, or that's what made them that unique generation of Muslims and human beings, is that they were quick to acknowledge that their ways were not correct, that they were making mistakes that were affecting themselves and affecting other people, and they were quick to turn it around and actually repent and start behaving differently. I think that's what we lack. We lack that piece, really. But otherwise, everyone is making mistakes all the time. And the Sahaba, and the people of Medina, and some of them obviously were not Sahaba. They were Munafiqeen, they were Mushrikeen, they were Yahud, a lot of people in Medina. And there was a lot of flaws, a lot of problems. And amongst them, we had talked about a few. We talked about racism at the beginning. And then we talked about rumors and gossip, which is what the story of Aisha radiallahu anha was about. But then I put up for you, these are all the topics that were revealed within that year and a half, and these were the surahs that were revealed during that time. So if you want to know, like if you're kind of going along with me here, you go home, you recite Surah An-Nisa, An-Nur, Al-Ma'idah, Al-Hujurat. These were the surahs that were revealed, and they tackled a lot of these issues. They tackled the issue of zina very clearly, and I gave you the example of that at the beginning when I went over the first page of Surah An-Nur that talked about the horrific nature of this sin and the punishment that can be associated and attached to it if it's done publicly or it's done in a way that lacks any form of haya. Gossip, وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. And may you not speak ill of people behind their backs. يُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَنْ يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. Any of you want to eat the corpse of a dead brother of his, or the person they're speaking of? If you don't want to eat their dead corpse, then don't speak of them behind their back. And of course, gossip, is the umbrella word, and qadhf, which is the story of Aisha, is a specific a subtype. Qadhf is where you gossip about a woman and you speak about her ird, or about a man as well, but mostly about a lady. And you talk about her integrity, you speak about her sharaf, about how the purity of her ways, and that's of course there's a punishment that's associated to that. Gossip itself doesn't have a punishment associated to it. If you perform ghiba, you speak about someone that you know behind their back, there's no punishment. But if you do it about a woman and you speak and the gossip you are entertaining or that you're engaging in is an accusation or is about her performing zina, then now there's a public punishment that will be applied to you. Imagine that you live in a society where if you say something like that, or you post it, then the authorities will come pick you up and say this is how valuable the integrity of Muslim women is. That it's protected by law. It's protected by law that people don't speak about it. And gossip obviously being the umbrella problem. And I talked about this a little bit last time. But you absolutely cannot afford to be someone who engages in gossip. And if you are surrounded by people who do, then you unsurround yourself by these people. And if you have to stay without friends, then you stay without friends. And I say this unequivocally and with very little empathy. Meaning, if like, oh, the only friends I have are like this, then you don't have friends. Oh, but I don't want to be alone. You're going to be alone. And I honestly don't care. Like you absolutely don't spend time with people who behave that way, because the world is filled with good individuals. You have to find them, but you shouldn't be spending time with people who engage in gossip. Assumptions. Right? Having assumptions in people, having bad assumptions in people, and this is how the Quran addressed the story of Aisha. لولا إذ سمعتموه ظن المؤمنون والمؤمنات بأنفسهم خيرا. What you should have done when you heard the rumor being spread is that you had good assumptions in yourselves. If you had good assumptions in yourself, then you're going to have good assumptions in Aisha and Safwan, and the rumor would have been killed early on, would have died early on. But in assumptions in general, you see someone walking in, you don't know them, you meet someone for the first time, don't start building assumptions. Don't start building assumptions about their character and who they are, and whether this is an ill-driven behavior. It's all going to be ego. Ego does this stuff. Unless you are hiring for a position at a company, or the person is knocking on your door asking for your daughter in marriage, or you are trying to start a business with someone, then these are the only situations where or you are responsible for them, like it's your child or your student, then you should not have bad assumptions in people. You shouldn't allow yourself to build negative assumptions in people. Oh, they're arrogant. Oh, they're full of themselves. Oh, they're deceitful, or they're lying, or they're. Be careful when you make these assumptions. It's a reflection of who you are, and it's a disease that of the heart that you should get rid of. Obviously, there are exceptions to this that you need to engage in that behavior, but it's very specific. The brotherhood, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ أَخَوَيْكُمْ وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Exclusively believers are brothers, and so you must always bring people together and amend any broken relationships. So he talked about equality, subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَى وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. You were created from male and female. You were made into populations and tribes and societies and communities and races and cultures, so that you may get to know one another, so that you may exchange information and you learn from each other. Mockery. ولا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكن خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب. Don't make fun of people, don't mock people. You don't know, maybe they're better than you in the eyes of Allah, and then now you've done something, now it's a sin that you have to carry. Don't do lams. And don't make fun of people behind their, make fun of people in a way that's condescending. Don't use nicknames that are offensive and bothersome. There's a question that I get a lot from the children, like nicknames. Nicknames are okay if the person who's being nicknamed likes it. If he likes his nickname, then it's fine. If he doesn't, then it's not. Like if the person dislikes the name that you're using to describe them, then you don't use it. This is a big deal. I don't know how much of a deal it is here in Canada. I don't feel like it is. I don't see it as much. But in the Middle East, this is like. So if you came to my village, right, and you drove up, you're told this is the beginning of my village, Kafarhaw. You started. And you don't know where you're going. You're coming to visit my dad. And you stop and you say, hey, can you tell me where the house of Ahmad Rajah is? He'll tell you there are 54 of them. Give me something more. He says, I want Ahmad Rajah, who's like around 50. Okay, that brings it down to 26. I want Abu Adnan. Oh, that's a 14. It's going to say, until you give him the nickname, he has no idea. Nicknames are a big deal in the Middle East. And most of the time, if the nickname is acceptable, like if the person is okay with it, then it's fine. It's only when it's offensive and the person doesn't like it. So it all comes down to the respect and empathy towards people and their, their image and their reputation. Loyalty, lowering the gaze. قُلْ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِم وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم. In the Surah An-Nur, the same surah that the story of Aisha radiallahu anha was in, you have يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِم وَقُلْ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ. That men and women lower their gaze. They don't stare at each other in a way that they're building shahwa, that they're building some form of lust, or they're looking at the person in a way where they are building an emotion that that is not healthy to have, because this is not someone that you're engaged to or married to. So having the adab of interacting with the opposite gender, opposite sex, but doing it in a way that's respectful, by lowering the gaze. And lowering the gaze is when you're talking to someone, you're looking, and you feel like this is too long, or now your eyes have wandered. So you look down, and it's a simple, easy reflex. Anyone who has any degree of decency engages in this without needing to hear it. By the way, in the Quran just came and solidified it as an adab. The Quran just makes sure that it's not just a general etiquette. No, it's an Islamic value. It's a way of behavior that we have to have. And the Prophet ﷺ, taught this to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, in a very practical way, often. Because women, I don't know, sometimes I think we imagine the way that the Muslims lived in Medina differently than it really was. We imagine that women and men were absolutely, completely, and fully segregated, where there was that is not true. That is absolutely untrue. There are certain behaviors or practices that exist in the Muslim world today that are more Bedouin in nature than they are Islamic in nature. And even if you watch sometimes some of the old Syrian, specifically the Syrian series that on TV, they'll show you back at the Uthmani time or the French time that ladies were all fully covered and no one, and if subhanAllah she put her face up for a second and someone saw her, then they're going to pull their knives and start fighting because he saw the face of my wife. This is all it's all lies. This is not how people were at all. This is just it's fictitious and it's just fun to watch, but it's not truthful. The masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was no bigger than this masjid, and men and women sat here in the same place together with nothing in between them. This is how it was during his time, ﷺ. There's a lot of interaction between people. It's just they learned to lower the gaze. They learned hijab. Hijab existed in these وَلْيَضْرِبْنَا, right? In the same surah, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَا بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ. May they take the cover that they put on their heads, cover their full head and cover their necks. The jayb, it's called the jayb, it's where the neck is, because ladies would wear it in a way where you could still see the hair, you could still see the ears and the neck and stuff. And the Quran said, no, take that and cover. Just don't let it be visible. And the same thing for men, to cover their awrah. وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُم ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُم. So we both, men and women in society, had to learn that there's a dress code that we all have to abide by. Clearly, the dress code for women is more extensive and more comprehensive than it is for men, but it's still there. In order for us to survive in society with respect, we have to lower our gaze, we have to dress in a certain way. There has to be boundaries and ways for us to exist in an appropriate and respectful manner. Marriage, وَأَنْكِحُوا الْأَيَامَ مِنْكُمْ وَالصَّالِحِينَ مِنْ عِبَادِكُمْ وَإِمَائِكُمْ. The Quran came in Surah An-Nur, the same surah, and commanded that you grant marriage to the people who are unmarried amongst you, who want to get married, who are looking for it, who are capable of marriage and are in need. يعني وليستعفف الذين لا يجدون نكاحا حتى يغنيهم الله من فضله. And if someone is too poor, they have no wealth at all to get married, then may they perform iffah, may they strengthen their chastity, their ethic, the ethic of abstinence and chastity, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them enough wealth so that they can go ahead and get married. Asking permission to يا الذين آمنوا لا تدخلوا بيوتا غير مسكونة حتى يؤذن أو لا تدخلوا بيوتا غير بيوتكم حتى تستأنسوا وتسلموا على أهلها. Don't enter a house before knocking on the door. Don't open a closed door without making sure that you seek permission to enter this place. وَإِنْ قِيلَ لَكُمْ ارْجِعُوا فَارْجِعُوا in the verses. And if it's told to you that this is not a good time, then you go. And if you're told this is not a good time for you to come today, or we don't have, and this is very, it's almost unheard of in the Arabic world. But no, the Quran says, you may knock on a door, and the people are just not in a position to, accept guests at this. And then you have to be okay. If you're told, well, hey, it's not a good time today, then you go home and you don't feel disrespected. It's Quranic in nature. The verses talked about stealing. والسارق والسارقة فقطعوا أيديهما in Surah Al-Ma'idah. It talked about living with people in different religions. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين. Inheritance was a law. It was a social law that didn't exist prior to this timing. The Surah An-Nisa on its own was a groundbreaking, not just surah, but a groundbreaking incident in the history of the Prophet ﷺ's life. And it happened right after the story of Aisha. Within this year and a half, the totality of Surah An-Nisa was revealed, because not only was the surah named women, but it also advocated for their rights and advocated for their for their equality and for their ability to function in society. And one of the things that obviously offered was their rights and inheritance, because Arabs did not perform this. Arabs still don't perform this. It hasn't really changed that much, unfortunately. They're still not doing it. But it was يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين. She's going to inherit just like you. Maybe not the same amount, but she's entitled to her inheritance. I grew up in a place where they would come together for inheritance and say, خلاص, do you want your inheritance, Fulan? No, خلاص, I'll give it to my brother. And she had to do this culturally. She didn't say it that way. People would shame her. And there was like this big movement, alhamdulillah, some of the shuyukh say, well, that's fine, she can give up her inheritance, but first she has to receive it. They made a shart that yes, a woman can give up her inheritance to her brothers, but she has to receive it first, meaning the wealth has to go to her hand, and then she can give it back. 99% of the time, none of it came back. If you give her her haqq and inheritance, you wouldn't give it back. Very rarely do they give it back. But it was a way to kind of make them feel embarrassed about asking for what is theirs, what is Quranically their right. SubhanAllah, these verses were important, and Arabs didn't like these verses. The Arabs did not like this. Didn't like any of this. All of these social values that the Quran came and pointed out and started to change and demanded people behave differently, were not popular amongst people. The weak, the disabled. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْبِلْدَانِ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ. It talks about the verse, people who are مستضعفين. لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر والمجاهدون. Talking about the people who are weak, who are disabled, who can't, making sure their rights are recognized, that their obligations are brought down or are decreased. This is an important part of society. This didn't exist. Alhamdulillah, today we live in a time where a lot of these values have become mainstream. They weren't mainstream back then at all. It's interesting. People are intelligent, but a lot of these values just weren't mainstream. So the stuff that you and I take for granted as, of course, you have to stand by the disabled and you have to help the weak, and not really. Not 1,400 years ago, that wasn't. So when the Quran came and talked about these things and established their rights and established their obligations or the decreased amounts of responsibility, this was a lot. This changed a lot. So these were the ethics and the values and the practices that this year and a half was focused on. And the Sahaba had to acknowledge that some of them were not behaving in that way. A lot of them were not understanding the world this way, and a lot of them were not on the same page. Lowering the gaze is something people still don't do. Inheritance is something people still don't do. Hijab is something people still don't do. Gossip, we are gossip galore in this age and era. You have social media, that's all people do. It's just, we have made gossip so much easier than it ever was before. It was more difficult. You know the person, you have to find the person, you have to find time to sit with them, you have to make sure no one else is there so you can talk about someone by their back. Now it's easy, just text, and you can text about one person for hours upon hours without even feeling any degree of guilt. And these behaviors are human. These are human problems. They're not Muslim problems. They're human problems that the Quran came and pointed out, okay, you need to change all these things. And the Prophet ﷺ would take the time and help the Sahaba understand the reason for changing it. And once they started to change, after the story of Aisha, and this is why I'm trying to connect all of it for you. After what happened in Medina with the story of Aisha radiallahu anha, there was this collective guilt, if I can use that term. May Allah forgive me. There was collective guilt amongst the people in Medina, the Muslims, after what the Prophet ﷺ had to endure, after what Aisha had to endure, after what Abu Bakr and his wife had to endure, after what Safwan had to endure. After these people were heavily affected by this rumor. It ruined, it would ruin their lives, almost. You could say, of course, alhamdulillah, it didn't, but you could say this is an event that could ruin someone's life. So there was a lot of guilt when the Quran came and said, يَعِظُكُمُ اللَّهُ أَن تَعُودُوا لِمِثْلِهِ أَبَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning you to never do this again. You never do this. It's not accept. وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. And you're thinking it's something that's not important and it's a big deal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Quran was very harsh, rightfully so, on this issue. So there's a collective guilt amongst the people in Medina, and that's where the khair came. Because of that guilt, because of people feeling, I can't believe we didn't do, we hurt him that way, we disobeyed Allah that way. When the Quran started to come down with all of these changes, you can't do this, behave like that, غض البصر, wear your hijab, treat women and weak and the disabled this way, and have equality, and don't have bad assumptions, and don't gossip. People start to smarten up. Everyone started to follow the rules appropriately. A really important story that I'm going to try and tell you today, if I'm able to do it, is the story of a dir' al-masruqa, stolen shield story. And this is a good example of this timing, of this year and a half between Hudaybiyah, between Khandaq and Hudaybiyah, the Battle of the Trench and the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. This story happened during that time to establish even more the importance of social order, of justice, of equality, of law, of people behaving in ethically and appropriately, of us not tolerating any form of corruption amongst us, even if it's family driven, even if it's a friend of ours, someone that we love, or someone that's related to us. And the story goes like this. So there's a few people that you need to know about in this story. So first of all, you have to know about the sons of Abna Ubayriq. And I'm not going to use their names because their names are actually used today. So I don't want anyone to hear their name being used in a bad context. So I'm just going to use in a context. So I'm just going to use the names of the sons of Ubayriq. And they have names, and I'm going to ignore their names. So these were troublemakers from the Khazraj. They were troublemakers, and they were not, they didn't behave very well. They were known amongst the people. They had accepted Islam. They were Muslims, but they were people who, they had their sideways. They were crooked. They did things that they shouldn't do. The guy who's telling us the story is a man by the name of Rifa'a ibn Zayd, radiallahu anhu. He's from Aus. And he was an early Muslim, like in terms of accepting Islam when Mus'ab ibn Umayr came in. He was an early Muslim. And he had been working, so I'm just putting about the sons of Ubayriq on the side, just so you know about them. So this movie is something you can imagine. So Rifa'a is telling us this story, and he had an uncle that he loved, and he wanted his uncle to accept Islam. And his uncle was very late and very slow. He was an older guy who was just set in his ways and just didn't really respond. And Rifa'a his father had died, and this uncle took care of him, and he loved his uncle. He wanted him to accept Islam, so he was relentless. He kept on going after him until finally his uncle, who goes by the name of Qatada ibn Nu'man, accepts Islam. And Rifa'a is very happy. He couldn't be happier with this. He takes him to the Prophet ﷺ. He celebrates the acceptance of Islam. It's just a big deal for him because he's someone he loves, as we should all feel that way, obviously. Qatada doesn't have a big family. Some narrations say that he married, but he couldn't have children. And he was, at that time, single. He didn't have a wife. he was an older gentleman who was wealthy, who had like enough wealth. And what he did, he had outside of his house a shed. Arab back then, they would have like a shed or an area, a place, Beit al-Muni, we call it in Syria, is where you would put all of your, all the food that you are storing for the winter, for when nothing comes out of the ground. So tamar and zabib, yani, so it's dates and yani, raisins and wheat and barley and yani, oils and stuff. Like you put it all in an area. People would sometimes put it on the attic, and sometimes they would have a shed right beside the house where they would hide all that stuff in and put it in there. And their armor, because armor was a big deal. You had to have your weaponry as a Arab living back in that time. And think about it. None of us put your hand up if you have weaponry at home and you're. Or maybe don't, even if you do, because you don't want to be labeled. But I mean, no, men don't have this. You don't go. There's not a part of the house where you go in and you turn into Batman and you walk out with your. Like we don't have this anymore. But back then there was. You would go. You would have your full armor, and your sword, your bow and arrow, your shield. All that stuff would be there. And so he had a shed, and he had bought some appliances, and he had bought some barley and wheat, and he had bought a new shield, a new shield. It was and he put it in the shed, and he closed the door and locked it. And the sons of Ubayriq, they saw Qatada buying it, and like, the rich old man, enjoying all this wealth, that mentality type of thing, like rip him off. So they waited for Qatada to go to sleep one night, and they went in and they broke into the shed, and they stole a bunch of stuff out of it. Qatada wakes up in the morning, and he's really upset. He's really upset with this. He's not upset about the barley or the wheat, but he's upset about the shield. The shield is very expensive, and he had been waiting for a while to buy it, and it's almost like wassa ali. He asked for someone to bring it for him specifically from a different part. It was like it's something to acquire, and it was stolen. It was bothered by this. Rifa'a, who's telling us the story, said, and my fear was that my uncle was going to yartad an Islam after this happened. I accept Islam. It's like the guy who comes in, he's like hasn't prayed in the masjid for 15 years. Come pray in the masjid, come pray in the masjid, come tayyib. He comes pray in the masjid, he walks out, his Nikes are stolen, right? And he's like, you know what? I've received the message, and thank you for nothing. And so if you're bringing someone in, you know that their heart is not in the right place, and they're not really holding. You want to make sure that things go well for them up front. So Qatada accepted Islam. 2 days later, they break into his shed and they steal. And he's upset. So Rifa'a said, don't worry about it, I'll look into this. So Rifa'a goes and he starts to do some digging. He finds a trail of barley or wheat. Right? He finds a trail. He follows the trail. The trail leads right to the house of the sons of Ubayriq. Now, one of the sons is sitting on the satah, on the roof of the house, and he sees Rifa'a come by snooping. So now he's scared. Now he's worried. We may be found out, like we may be busted. Rifa'a goes and asks some questions, asks around, and said, yeah, last night this house they were having a feast outside. We smelled the scent of bread, wheat, right? So we could smell bread and zayt and stuff, and we know that they have they don't have anything like that. They're crooks. They don't work. They don't like but we smelled it. So now Rifa'a is like even more certain that they stole it. They have a record. There was like physical evidence, that there are testimonies now, but they're Muslim and they're from a different tribe, so it's a very tricky thing, right? Just recently, Khazraj and Aus were still kind of fighting. He doesn't want to make it worse. Same time, if his uncle hears that Muslims stole his stuff, he's going to probably leave. So he's in a pickle. He doesn't know what to do. He's very bothered by this. So he goes and he talks to the Prophet ﷺ as consultation. What do I do? These people, Bayt Ubayriq, I am pretty sure, Ya Rasulullah, they stole from my uncle. And my uncle, hadith ahdin bi Islam. He just accepted Islam just a few days ago. When yakhsha ala imanihi. I'm very scared for his iman. And I don't know what to do here. فَمَاذَا تَرَى Ya Rasulullah? I want you to go, what do you see? What should we do here? Can you go and fix this? Now, the guy who was sitting on the roof, when he saw Rifa'a kind of snooping around and leaving, he didn't wait. He got his spidey senses like this is not. We've been busted. So he was proactive, right? He's a smart crook. He was proactive. So here's what they did. So he went down and he said, look, Rifa'a, I think, has figured out who took the stuff. So I need everyone here. If they ask, if a question is asked about food, we didn't have it. If they push, then we got it from Beit Fulan, we bought it. And that night that we were, there's always going to be an alibi. Where were you? At 1 o'clock at night on Thursday when it was broken into. I need an alibi. You need someone to testify that I was with them that night. So the family of Ubayriq, the people who weren't involved, the guys who didn't actually steal, but their siblings and their cousins, the people who were there, all agreed, yes, we got you. We'll cover you, no problem. If we're asked, we'll say it. And then what he did, he and his brothers who had stolen, they took the shield. The shield's expensive. They want to sell it. But now that they're busted, they're scared. That's going to get in trouble. So they went and they dug a hole in the backyard of a man by the name of Zayd ibn Samin. And Zayd ibn Samin is a Jewish gentleman who is a neighbor to Qatada ibn Nu'man. I hope I still got you here, that we're not fully confused. So Qatada, the guy who was robbed, his lot is right next to the lot of a Jewish man by the name of Zayd ibn Samin. And Zayd was away for a few days. Zayd was away in the morning to the market. So they went to his backyard. They dug a hole. They hid the shield and they covered it up. And they went. All in anticipation of what's going to happen next. Now, what are they anticipating? They're anticipating that Rifa'a is going to go to the Prophet ﷺ and say, "This is what I found out. I got people testified that they were cooking, they were baking at night." Baking at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they smelled the bread and they smelled the zayt. And these guys don't have, they didn't run it. When did they run into all this? Where are you going to? They didn't have 24/7 Walmarts to go buy stuff. At night, you're not going to run into stuff at night. You're not going to do it at night. And I saw the trail of sawiq. You can see it, Ya Rasulullah. You can see the trail of barley. Obviously, this is not a slam dunk piece of evidence, but it's circumstantial. It's helpful. So what they did is they cleaned up the whole trail, Banu Ubayriq. They cleaned up the trail. They dug a hole and hid in this guy's backyard, and they agreed what they were going to do on their alibis, and they waited for the Prophet ﷺ to come and ask. Now the Prophet ﷺ is a judge. He has to go by evidence. Judges don't go by a good judge doesn't go by the trust he has in the person who's making the accusation. The Prophet ﷺ knows Banu Ubayriq are a bunch of thugs. He knows that about them. And he knows Rifa'a is a good Muslim. Rifa'a has been with him the whole time. Some narrations say that Rifa'a is a Badri. And he said that he was there for Badr. Wallahu alam. We don't know for sure. But that he was one of the early Muslims. So he has more reason to trust what Rifa'a is saying and not to trust these people here. But he has to go by evidence. So he goes and he starts to, and he wants to perform an investigation. Banu Ubayriq weren't waiting. They came right to him. And he said, "Ya Rasulullah, we have a complaint." Khair, inshallah, what's your complaint? There are people who are speaking about us, about our integrity. You're the one who's been talking about gossip and talking about assumptions and talking about, when you use the verses to kind of serve yourself. Your Quran is teaching us no assumptions and no this. And people are talking about our integrity, talking about our honor, accusing us of stealing, and accusing a Muslim family, a good, honest, hardworking Muslim family of doing this. And the Prophet ﷺ, and they have no evidence. And if anything, they should be looking into his neighbor's, into his neighbor who is not even Muslim. We saw him digging a hole at night in his backyard a few nights ago. Allahu A'lam what he was doing. So the Prophet ﷺ, is now in a position where he's upset with Rifa'a. So Rifa'a, why did you come to me if you have no? They all have alibis. They all. He has to go with testimony. So Rifa'a, he says, the worst day of my life. And he tells a story that was the worst day, that was the worst moment of my entire life. When the Prophet ﷺ looked at me and said, "Ta'tini tattahimu baytan min buyuti al-muslimin, wala bayyina." You come to me and you're accusing a house of Muslims. You have no evidence. Nothing. Where's the trail of wheat and barley? Nothing. Where is they go into the house to look, there's nothing, there's no goods in the house. They all have alibis for that night. They all have a story. We bought it from here, we took it from there. And then they accuse the man, Zayd ibn Samin. So they call Zayd, and Zayd's like, "I have no idea." He said, "Well, let us search as we searched his house." "Sir, go ahead, search." They search. They search the backyard. They dig it up. Right? Now Zayd is standing there, and everyone's like, "Yeah, you see? And now Rifa'a said, yeah, this is his absolute nightmare. Now Rifa'a is in the worst position he could be. He accused a house of Muslims. The dir'a, the shield, was dug up from the backyard of his neighbor who's not Muslim. Yeah, it's a big problem. And Rifa'a is standing there looking horrible. His uncle is obviously at the verge of leaving Islam. It's the worst day of his life. And now the Prophet ﷺ has to, pass judgment. Zayd, why is this in your backyard? Did you steal this? He has no, going by evidence, it seems like he's the person that's in trouble for this. The agreement was that there would be judgment passed after Fajr the next morning. There would be like Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam would come to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam right before Fajr. Right before Fajr. With these verses in Surah An-Nisa, ayah 105 to, I think it's 113 or so. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ لِتَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِمَا أَرَاكَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَكُنْ لِلْخَائِنِينَ خَصِيمًا. Indeed, we send this book upon you so that you, rightfully, with righteousness, with haqq, so that you may pass judgment amongst people based on the evidence that is offered to you. You can only do it with the evidence that you've got. It's hard. Being a judge is a hard job. It's very difficult because you're sitting there and you are to a certain degree controlling the fate of people, right? What's going to happen to them. So how are you going to do this? You have to be you have to have a critical mind. You have to be very evidence driven. You have to have a very strong attention to detail. And the Prophet ﷺ would often warn people of being judges and warn judges of outcomes of not doing it with integrity and doing it with istiqamah. And this verse started out by saying to the Prophet ﷺ, we descended this book upon you with righteousness so that you may judge amongst people with haqq, to the best of what you can, based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you, based on what you're seeing in terms of evidence. And then he's told, وَلَا تَكُنْ لِلْخَائِنِينَ خَصِيمًا. And don't be for the traitors. Khasim is someone who defends someone. Right? Khasim is someone who will argue with someone on behalf of someone else. So don't be for these traitors a defense lawyer. Don't defend someone who's a traitor. وَاسْتَغْفِرِ اللَّهِ. And seek forgiveness in Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. Because he got it wrong, alayhi salatu wasalam, if I'm allowed to say that. As in, he saw that, okay, Zayd is mudhnib, is the one who's at fault, and the sons of Ubayriq are exonerated from this accusation. So the Quran came and said, no, you're defending a traitor here. So seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا تُجَادِلْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ خَوَّانًا أَثِيمًا. And don't argue in favor of the people who are betraying themselves. يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Again, it's similar, right, to what he said in Surah An-Nur. When Surah An-Nur, it said, during the story of Aisha, what you should have done, لَوْلَا إِذْ سَمِعْتُمُوهُ, right? What you should have done, ظَنَّ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بِأَنفُسِهِمْ خَيْرًا. The believers, male and female, should have thought or had good assumptions in themselves. So again here, he uses the same word. يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ. They were betraying themselves. This trend in the Quran is extremely powerful. I gave a few khutbahs on this like years ago. Everything you do in the Quran, وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمَنْ يَشْكُرْ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَعَلَيْهَا. The Quran is filled with these, what you do for yourself. And the behaviors that you behave are benefiting you and they're harming you. When you betray your fellow Muslim brothers, you're betraying yourself. You just don't see it yet. You just don't know it yet. When you break the law, you're harming yourself because you are now you are contributing to the demise of your own society, and you're harming yourself. When you steal, when you evade, whatever sharr that you do in society, you are strengthening evil within your community, and that evil eventually is going to circulate and come right back at you. It's going to hurt you and your children in the future. So the Quran is this is all it does. It keeps on reminding us. It's about you. يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُم. Those are betraying themselves. Indeed, Allah does not love those who betray and are sinful. يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ النَّاسِ وَلَا يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ. They hide from the ears and eyes of people, and they don't hide from the sight and hearing of Allah. وَهُوَ مَعَهُمْ إِذْ يُبَيِّتُونَ مَا لَا يَرْضَى مِنَ الْقَوْلِ. And He is with them as they are plotting at night to say things that He would not be satisfied with, subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the guy on the roof went down and told him, look, here's what we have to say. Here's my alibi. Where was I? Where were you? Where did we get it from? Get our story straight. Everyone good? And they all said yes. Well, I mean, I didn't steal anything. Yeah, but no. You're accomplice. You're an accomplice. إِذْ يُبَيِّتُونَ, as they plotted at night, مَا لَا يَرْضَى مِنَ الْقَوْلِ, to say things that He would not be satisfied with. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطًا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses everything that they've done. Everything that they've been doing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows of all of it. He encompasses every detail of it. هَا أَنْتُمْ هَؤُلَاءِ جَادَلْتُمْ عَنْهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Here you are, O Muslims, as you went on your way to argue in their favor in this dunya, because the Sahaba, many of them were like, yes, Ya Rasulullah, who is this Muslim who is accusing other Muslims, tarnishing their reputation, starting a civil war between Aus and Khazraj again, while the obvious culprit is the non-Muslim neighbor that's living right beside him. Right? And they're arguing, no, these are good people, with no evidence to argue in either direction. People end up, people stand by things just based on, when those who were arguing weren't arguing based on evidence and truth. They were arguing just based on tribalism. I'm related to them, so they're my neighbors, they're my friends, so I'm going to defend them in a court of law. When really, ha antum haula, the Quran is saying, here you are, as you all do, you're arguing on their behalf in dunya. فَمَن يُجَادِلُ اللَّهَ عَنْهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَمَّن يَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ وَكِيلًا. So who's going to argue for them on the day of judgment in front of Allah? And who's going to be their trustee on the day of judgment when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings them and shows them what they did and holds them accountable for it? And then the verses, and that was of course enough for the Prophet ﷺ to know exactly what to do. And I'm going to go through the rest of the verses, but I'll tell you what happened so that we don't run out of time. Immediately alayhi salatu wasalam called upon people. Some narrations say He called upon them before Fajr. It's very rare. He could just wait, but no, He had to call people right then and there. This is a musibah. What just happened is a musibah. The Quran came and exonerated a non-Muslim man and proved a Muslim family to be the thieves. It's as if we didn't have enough problems within the Muslim community at that point. Khazraj and Aus are still hot. They haven't really cooled down yet. Right? The question that the scholars ask, the Mufassirin and the Ahl al-Siyar, is a reflective question. Is why did it have to be Quran? Why couldn't it have just been Jibreel telling the Prophet ﷺ, here's the judgment. It was this person, not that person. And then it's a quick. No, why did it have to be Mus'haf that we recite till this day, until the day of judgment will be in the Quran? Right? Because that is the value of justice in our deen. Nothing is taken into consideration when oppression or injustice is about to occur. Nothing. There's nothing to consider. But these are our brothers. But the other person is not even Muslim. But nothing matters. An act of injustice was about to occur. You drop everything. No considerations exist at all of any sort. Nothing matters. We don't feel bad about it, or maybe it's more wise to do it this way. No. Whatever justice is, justice must be served. It must be served clearly and swiftly and publicly. And whatever difficulty comes after that comes, we'll deal with it. But we will not hide it. Well, he's our Muslim brother. They're Muslims, so we're going to hide. Let's clean this up. Sorry, Zayd. Here's a few bucks for your trouble. But don't say anything to anyone. We'll just act like this didn't happen. You guys, maybe leave the city for a few years. We'll hush the whole story. No, the Quran will come and make it a public matter till the day of judgment. And the Prophet ﷺ had to call the Sahaba and we were wrong. Astaghfirullah. That's how he started his. Why? Because that was the command he was given. He was told to astaghfirullah. He started his khutbah. Astaghfirullah. May Allah forgive me. I was wrong. Oh Zayd, we are sorry. It was not you. You are innocent. You have nothing to do with this. Forgive all of us. It was Abna Ubayriq who did this. They are the ones who they performed ridda. The sons of Ubayriq. After this, they left Islam and they left Medina. وَالْتَحَقُوا بِالْمُشْرِكِينَ. And they never accepted Islam afterwards. At least I have no evidence that they did. Maybe they did. Maybe inshallah, Rabbana hadahum, Allah guided them, but they didn't. And it started, and it brought back, yani Qatada ibn Nu'man is an Awsi who was robbed by a Khazraj. Yeah, it's all this ongoing problems. The Quran, nope, doesn't matter. Doesn't care. I say it that way, and I hope that's not disrespectful. It doesn't care, because whenever you're weighing out haqq and batil, there are certain moments where the importance of righteousness and truth outweighs any degree of considerations or sensitivity or cultural issues, and justice is one of them. The Quran, to me, this is one of the most powerful stories that exists within our deen. Our book, the Quran, I want you to let's think about this from zoom out for a moment. Your Quran was revealed to your prophet with the sole intention of exonerating a Jewish man from an accusation that was unjust, and to prove the theft or prove the accusation upon a Muslim family. Understanding? No hush hush and no lie. No, very clear, openly. To be a surah that is going to be recited till the Day of Judgment. That is justice in Islam. That is the value of justice in our deen. That it does not matter who did it, who didn't do it, doesn't matter. What is just? What's just is that this man has been accused and he didn't do anything. So it would be much easier to say, well, Allah, this non-Muslim person stole, and it looks better for us as a community. It'll strengthen us as a community. It's batil, it's dhulm, it's oppression. Nothing good ever comes from that, ever. The verses, if you continue them, وَمَن يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا, like the verses start to give the lessons after the story has been told, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains who did it and what you're going to do about it. You're going to fix this now. Ya Rab, do I wait? No, don't wait. Bring people and fix it now. And tell all of them who did this and who did not. And of course, Rifa'a, he felt so much better after all this happened, because, and alhamdulillah, Qatada stayed Muslim. He was able, Rifa'a, because the Prophet ﷺ from Bayt Mal al-Muslimin paid him back for all that was stolen from him. And the verses continue to explain, وَمَن يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا أَوْ يَظْلِمْ نَفْسَهُ ثُمَّ يَسْتَغْفِرِ اللَّهِ يَجِدِ اللَّهَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. Anyone who does a mistake, يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا أَوْ يَظْلِمْ نَفْسَهُ, where he oppresses himself, again, using the same word, oppresses himself, even though he oppressed someone else, but because we're all one, we're all similar. You're oppressing yourself when you oppress your brother. Anyone who does something wrong or oppresses himself, and then he finds it in himself to turn to Allah and seeking forgiveness, he will find that Allah is forgiving. So Allah did not close the door for Banu Ubayriq. No, you make istighfar. You made the mistake, now repent. Allah will forgive you. But they didn't, unfortunately. وَمَن يَكْسِبَ إِثْمًا فَإِنَّمَا يَكْسِبُهُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. What I was talking to you for a few minutes ago. Anyone who performs a sinful act, he is performing that sinful act to only harm himself. You're only harming yourself when you perform a sinful act. فَإِنَّمَا يَكْسِبُهُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. عَلَى نَفْسِهِ. The consequences of your sinful act will hurt you, and only you. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. وَمَن يَكْسِبَ خَطِيئَةً أَوْ إِثْمًا. Anyone who performs a mistake or performs a sin, ثُمَّ يَرْمِ بِهِ بَرِيئًا, and then he goes and he accuses someone innocent of it, فَقَدْ احْتَمَلَ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا. This person is carrying with them يوم القيامة a buhtan, a lie that has no essence, no substance to it, and this is the punishment for this is Jahannam وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, and clear sin. And then the verses turn to the Prophet ﷺ, and it says to him, listen, this is how serious this matter is. This is how serious this matter is. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ وَرَحْمَتُهُ. If it wasn't for the bounty of Allah upon you and the mercy of Allah upon you, لَهَمَّتْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ أَن يُضِلُّوكَ. There was a group of them that were trying to mislead you. There was a group of them trying to misguide you. وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُم. And again, and they're only misguiding themselves. Again, this is the repetition of this concept that what you do wrong in this world will only harm you. It's going to come back and hurt you. This is what the Quran teaches. This is what the Quran teaches. Any evil that you perform, it's going to come back to you. Just, you think you're harming other people. You're harming yourself first and foremost. وَمَا يَضُرُّونَكَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. But they have no ability to harm you. وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has descended upon you the book and the wisdom. وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمْ, and He taught you that which you did not know before. وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا, and the bounty of Allah upon you is great, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For him, this was a moment where he had to revise things. That wow, okay, we need to be even more diligent than we ever needed to be before in terms of because this is how important justice is. It doesn't matter who's being accused. It doesn't matter who's a culprit and who. It doesn't matter. Justice always comes. If you go to these surahs that were revealed in this period, and Nisa and Al-Ma'idah, you're going to find this ayah, these ayat, these two verses. For the sake of time, you have 10 minutes, so I'll try and explain them to you. These verses are documents of justice that are unparalleled in my opinion. One of them is actually a portrait in the UN as one of the most powerful statements of justice in holy literature or in religious scripture in Vienna. And the one on the right, the one in Surah An-Nisa. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. This ayah came at the end of Surah An-Nisa after all these stories have been told, the stories of justice and injustice and dhulm and adl. This verse came at the end. This is what the verse said. O those who believe, كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله. So if you look at the one right in front of it, you'll find that there's a slight difference. Right? The one in front of it is كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط. So it's a little bit of a switch. And the reason being why that's the case, the qawwam is standing for something. Shuhada is applying something, right? So one of them is a ethical stance, it's a principle, and the other one is a practice. Surah An-Nisa is an ethical surah. It's all it does. It teaches the ethical standard of our deen. That's what it does. So in that surah, he said, كونوا قوامين بالقسط. May you take a stance for ethics, for justice. Ethically, may you stand by justice. Shuhada lillah. And when you testify correctly, you do that for the sake of Allah. When you do that for the sake of Allah. وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Even if that means that you need to testify against yourself. Even if you're put in a position where you have to admit that you did it yourself. There's laws in North America where you can plead the fifth, right? Pleading the fifth is where you just don't say anything. Why? Because you have the right. Listen to this. This is one of the reasons we're corrupt in North America. You have the right not to say anything that will incriminate you, even if you perform the crime. The Quran says no. If you are the criminal, then you must testify against yourself. وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Why? Because you stand ethically, in a principled manner by justice. In a principled way, you stand by justice. And when you testify, you will testify for the sake of Allah, even if that means you have to testify against yourself. وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ. Or if you have to testify against your parents. Allahu Akbar. The nightmare of nightmares. Imagine witnessing your parent performing a crime and then you have to testify against them in a court of law. May Allah preserve all of you from ever having to witness anything like that. I say, because this is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. How would you do it? I perform this exercise with people often. And the funny thing is, most of them say I would never do it, even after listening to all of this. Even after going through the Quran, I wouldn't do it. But Jahannam is fine. No, that's not how this works. Now, some people say they'll do it, but they usually don't like their parents to begin with, and that doesn't count. It doesn't count. That's not what it is. The reason that the ayah is saying this is because the norm is that we love our parents. You love your father, you love your mother. You would never want to hurt them. But what's more valuable is your love for them, protecting them, or haqq, or adl, or justice. أو الوالدين والأقربين, or your relatives. إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما. Whether your parent or your relative is wealthy or poor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of them. It's not your job to protect them when it's unjust to protect them. فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا. So don't follow your whims and desires and then go away from justice. and then swerve away from being just and being righteous. وَإِن تَلْوُوا أَوْ تُعْرِضُوا, and if you turn away or you refuse what's being said, or you say no to it when it's being told to you, and whenever I ask the question to them, they say no, I recite the last piece of the verse. This is what Allah says. وَإِن تَلْوُوا أَوْ تُعْرِضُوا, and if you turn your back or you say no, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indeed knows the details of everything that you're doing. You're going to be held accountable for this. And the accountability of dunya is always less difficult than the accountability of akhirah. The one in Surah Al-Ma'idah is more practical. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ لِلَّهِ. Oh, those who believe, take ethical stances for the sake of Allah. شُهَدَاءَ بِالْقِسْطِ, and testify with justice at all times. So this is the ayah here is kind of taking justice from being a principled position to practice, where you're going to testify with justice. وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. And don't let the hatred of a group of people or of a specific person make you, force you, or allow you to not be just. You hate someone and you're waiting for your opportunity to hurt them, and then you're granted that you can't oppress them. You still have to be just. If they did the right thing, then they did the right thing. Even if they're up against your parents. لا يجرمنكم شنآن. Shana'an is the hatred. يجرمنكم, to force you. Don't allow the hatred of some qawmin, the people, to force you or to make you ألا تعدلوا, so that you are not just. اعدلوا, be just. وأقرب للتقوى, is closer to achieving taqwa. واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. And beware of Allah, be mindful of Allah. Indeed, He knows all that which you are doing. This is the value. These are the values that were disseminated during this year and a half between the Prophet, between Khandaq and Hudaybiyah. And these are the stories that occurred and the lessons that the people of Medina learned. These are heavy lessons. Being called into the masjid before Fajr. What's going on? Here's what's going on. وَلَا تُجَادِلْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ النَّاسِ وَلَا يَسْتَخْفُونَ. The verses come and say these Muslims did it. A Jewish man didn't do it. That was a character building moment for the society, where they understood. Yes, it was left a lot of bitterness, and one tribe felt ashamed of themselves because their relatives did this, and the other one felt oppressed because things were stolen from their homes and the sanctity of their homes was mistreated. And yes, Muslims looked bad for a moment, but who cares? Justice is more important. That's the value that they learned. Towards the end of these 2 years, or end of this year and a half, a few things happened that you could use easily as evidence of things got a little bit better. Like, it wasn't all negative. No, there was a few instances, things happened, and you could see, oh, subhanAllah, there's some changes. People are behaving a little bit better. People have a better understanding. One of the things that happened is that one of the stories, or 3 stories that I'll talk to you about, I'm not going to get through today. We'll do it inshallah next week. But I'll start with the first one. A man by the name of Thumamah ibn Uthal, or ibn Athal, depending on which book of Seerah you're reading. And Thumamah was one of the kings of Rabi'ah. So if you've attended any of my Seerah courses, or some of my early, the early part of this series, I talked to you a little bit about how the Arabs are divided into groups. There are the Adnanites and the Qahtanites. And the Adnanites are the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam, and the Prophet alayhi salam was amongst them. And the Qahtanites are the people of Yemen and other parts of Arabia, and they don't really get along. Amongst the Adnanites themselves, there are 2 groups. Mudar, where the Prophet ﷺ comes from, and Rabi'ah, which is the other. And these 2 groups, are always in competition. They're competing with each other all the time. They're always trying to outdo the other. So when the Prophet ﷺ came from Mudar, it was hard for Rabi'ah to accept Islam, because they felt that it was a submission to the other group, and they were always in competition. So it was hard for them. And Thumamah was by far one of the most aggressive of their kings against the Muslims, and he had, amongst other things, alongside other mushrikeen in Arabia, had participated in the bloodshed of Muslims in treachery ways. Meaning, they would capture Muslims and murder them, or they would have a treaty and they would break it. So he had spilled Muslim blood unjustly, not within war, a number of times in the past. And he was caught. Allahu a'lam how, he was caught. And the people who caught him did not know who he was, but he was caught snooping around Medina. He was brought into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. He looks at him, ﷺ, he smiles. He smiles because this man is a king. Why he was alone and how he was caught, the stories don't really explain. I did some digging on this years ago, and apparently he was on a caravan with his troops and his soldiers, and he went to go to the bathroom, and he lost his way back. He couldn't figure out his way back. It was clouds, and he couldn't see. And by the time he figured out where he was caught. He was caught by the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ had uyun, and he had small troops that would kind of go around Medina to keep Medina safe, and they caught him. But they didn't know who he was. He just was someone that was unknown, and he didn't give his name because he was scared. He's a king. If he's caught, and his head is worth a lot of money. So he was brought to the masjid. The Prophet ﷺ looked at him. قال أتدرون من هذا? You know who this is? فقالوا لا يا رسول الله. قال هذا ملك الحيرة. This is the king of Hira, where Rabi'a is. هذا ثمامة بن أثال. فقال يا رسول الله أنضرب عنقه يا رسول الله, do we take his head off now? قال لا. واربطوه إلى سارية من سواري المسجد. No, just tie him to one of the, this is a sariya, these beamers or whatever they're called in the masjid that keep a thing up. Tie him to one of it and leave him. So they did. Yeah, خلاص, we're out of time. I'll tell you the continuation, inshallah, of this story next week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم. We'll continue, inshallah, an hour before Maghrib. So, like Maghrib next week will probably be more 7 o'clock. So we'll start at 6 sharp. Once Isha is 8, then this halaqah will go between Maghrib and Isha. Like once Isha is, which is not too long from now. So another week or two, and then we'll move this to after Maghrib, and the halaqah after will be after Isha, inshallah. So just bear with me for another week or so. Jazakumullah khair. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We need someone to make adhan for us, inshallah. Yeah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله